In this video lesson, we're going to continue on with bars, beats, and ticks as they relate to MIDI note recording and MIDI editing. So here we've got our bars, beats, and ticks field, and let's direct our attention over to the right now and take a look right over here in our transport area where it says grid, and you can see that we've got those same numbers duplicated with bars, beats, and ticks right there. The only difference is that it tells us that the grid that we have selected is 1 bar in length, it's 0 beats or additional beats long, and 0 additional ticks long. So if I'm in grid mode, which I am now, and I try dropping my cursor, you'll notice I can only drop it on one of the grid lines. As I go closer to beat 3, I'm trying, there we go, beat 2. If I drop it in the middle, it either moves my cursor or throws it over to the left or to the right. There's no in between, all right? So let's go ahead and change our grid value to the next smaller one, which is half bar, and see what happens. Aha, now that you can see I've got half note grid, so I've got a grid line at every bar, but I've also got a note halfway in between where every half note would be. So there's 2 beats right there, and there's 2 beats right there. Let's keep going. Quarter note, now you can see I've got 4 grid lines as I had in the previous lesson, so beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4. And when I drop my cursor in grid mode, you can see that the counter updates to the different beats within each bar. Let's go down to 8th note, and now here's where those numbers 0 to 960 start coming in, okay? Now, my grid for an 8th note is worth 0 bars, 0 beats, and 480 ticks. That means between here and here, there are 480 ticks. Remember, each quarter note, full quarter note, or full beat was worth 960 ticks. There are 2 8th notes in every quarter note. So if I get out my calculator and do 960 divided by 2, I get 480. So each 8th note is going to be worth 480 ticks. Or there's 480 ticks between the beginning of here, measure 2, beat 1, to the end of the first 8th note, which is right there, measure 2, beat 1, tick 480, starting at the end of measure 2, beat 1, going to right there, the quarter note of beat 2, it goes back to the 0, okay? Now let's go down to our next grid value, 16th note, so now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 grid values within that first quarter note, and between each one of those grid points is 240 ticks. So again, if I go back to my calculator and I start with 960, and there are 4 16th notes in every quarter note, so divide by 4, that gets me that number 240 right there. So let's just keep going there. Our next one is going to be, of course, the next one down, which is going to be 32nd notes. So if there were 4 16th notes in a quarter, they're going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 32nds, and each one of those 32nds will be worth 120 notes, or there's 120 ticks in between each one of these grid points, from there to there. So that's 120, I'm sorry, not grid points, ticks. There we go. All right, and you can keep going and go down to 64th note. I divide 120 by 2, and I get 60 ticks. So there we go. We take that, that number 960, which is our quarter note value, and we keep dividing it down per our musical values, and that gives us the number of ticks per each note. So anyway, 960 is our magic number, and as we divide down, we get smaller and smaller tick values per each one of our note values as we get smaller note values in relation to the quarter note. All right? So we'll come back and we'll continue on with quantization and duration, changing durations and velocities and other things relating to the counter in our next video lessons.